My name is Hannah Clark, 26. I had been living with Jacob, 28, for 6 months, though we'd been together for 2 years. Life felt steady, comfortable. We shared a cozy apartment in the city, cooked dinners together, argued sometimes, laughed a lot. He was the kind of boyfriend who could make me feel like the center of the world and still leave little cracks in the foundation, cracks I thought were just quirks of his personality. Yeah. That night was Melody's birthday party. She's been my best friend since college, the one who laughs at my bad jokes, knows when I'm lying to myself, and occasionally tells me truths I don't want to hear. Alongside her were Jenna and Brooke, completing our trio of inseparable friends. Their energy was electric, the kind that makes you forget time. Jacob and I arrived a little late, the apartment already buzzing with conversation, music, and laughter. I spotted Melody across the room, mid-laugh, her phone in one hand, wine glass in the other. Jenna and Brooke hovered nearby, teasing her about the ridiculous number of birthday posts she had prepared. It was the perfect, familiar chaos. Jacob had been unusually quiet, chatting only with the men in his friend group, Trevor, Desmond, and Kurt. I didn't think much of it. He always had his tight-knit circle, but then, as the night wore on and the drinks flowed, his laughter grew louder, a little too knowing, a little too familiar with Trevor. I tried to shrug it off. I was being paranoid. And then it happened. One of those hypothetical questions floated across the room, the ones that always reveal something you'd rather keep hidden. "Okay, this is serious," someone slurred, balancing a glass of wine. "If you had to choose a boyfriend or your friends, who wins?" Jacob didn't hesitate. He looked me dead in the eyes, glass raised, smirk dancing across his face. "I'd never choose a woman over my friends," he declared. The room erupted in laughter. Jenna elbowed Brooke. Brooke nudged Melody. I felt my smile falter. My stomach sank, and suddenly the noise of the party dimmed around me. I tried to play it off. "Understood," I said softly, picking at the rim of my glass. No anger, no confrontation. Just one word. Understood. Inside, though, my heart was doing cartwheels of confusion. Those words shouldn't have mattered, but they did. Why hadn't he hesitated? Why was there no moment of compromise? No tiny crack of doubt, just absolute certainty that his friends always came first. I stole a glance at Trevor. His smirk mirrored Jacob's. Something passed between them, a flicker of complicity, like an inside joke I wasn't invited to. My chest tightened. It wasn't jealousy, not yet. It was a creeping sense that I didn't quite belong, that my place in Jacob's life was conditional. The rest of the night blurred into typical party chaos. Music thumped, laughter rang, and I floated around like a ghost in my own life, caught between pretending nothing had happened and the gnawing feeling that something had shifted irrevocably. When it was time to leave, Jacob offered to walk me to the car. The city streets were damp with the evening drizzle, reflections of neon lights puddled on the asphalt. I leaned against him, trying to shake the unease. "You okay?" he asked, his hand brushing mine. "Yeah," I murmured, though my voice betrayed a tremor I couldn't hide. "Just tired, I guess." Jacob smiled, oblivious, and wrapped an arm around me. I wanted to feel comforted, to believe in the warmth of his embrace. But that earlier sentence, "I'd never choose a woman over my friends," kept echoing in my mind, like a distant warning I wasn't ready to hear. We drove home in silence, and when we stepped into our apartment, it felt different. The air was heavier. Something in me shifted, a small seed of doubt planted deep within my chest. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the words over and over. I tried to rationalize them, to convince myself that Jacob's friendships were just a quirky, harmless priority. But somewhere in the pit of my stomach, I knew. This was more than a joke, more than drunken bravado. This was a warning I wasn't ready to understand. And I didn't know it yet, but that night at Melody's birthday party would be the first ripple in a tidal wave that would crash into every corner of my life. I was about to discover that the people I trusted most, the ones I called my love and my friends, could be the ones to betray me most profoundly. The shadows of doubt were only just beginning to stretch across my life. I never imagined that the moment I walked through the door would be the one that split my life in two. It was a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday where the city hums quietly and the world seems ordinary. Jacob usually worked late, but equipment issues had freed him early. I thought it would be a nice surprise to bring lunch home. I picked up his favorite, carefully balanced the bag, and smiled to myself, imagining the warmth of his surprise. But when I turned the key in the lock, something felt off. The apartment smelled different, a faint hint of unfamiliar perfume mixing with the aroma of our takeout. My heart skipped a beat. I stepped inside and froze. There, in our bed, tangled in sheets that were supposed to be just ours, was Melody and Jacob. For a heartbeat, I thought I was hallucinating. Maybe it was the stress, the early lunch, the memories of his drunken words at her birthday party. But no, reality was sharper than any nightmare I'd conjured. They scrambled, scrambling for clothes and excuses. Jacob's face went pale, like he had just been caught mid-crime, which of course he had. Melody's eyes widened, guilt flickering behind the mask of surprise. "It's not what it looks like," Jacob stammered. His voice cracked, as if the words could erase the truth. "We didn't mean for it to happen." I felt my chest tighten, the air thick with disbelief and rage. The world seemed to slow, every heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling but sharp. "Both of you, now." "Trevor." "No, Melody's boyfriend." "Sorry, I meant Jacob." He hesitated, fumbling his shirt, fumbling his excuses. Melody just stared at me, the betrayal in her eyes sharper than any knife. Neither moved. "You don't understand," Jacob began, but I cut him off. "Pack your things. You're a guest here, not the owner of my life." For months, weeks actually, they had been sneaking around, weaving lies into the very fabric of my apartment. Every mundane Tuesday, every borrowed key, every work trip, it had all been cover. And for what? Pleasure? Thrill? I didn't know. I didn't want to know. Melody tried to justify it with the same old excuses that cheaters always seem to cling to. "It didn't mean anything, just physical. You're overreacting." 3 months. 3 months they had been betraying me under the same roof I thought was safe. 3 months of stolen mornings, whispered messages, and hidden touches. 3 months, I whispered, my voice breaking. "Half the time we've been living together. Half the time I've trusted both of you." Jacob swallowed, stammering. It just happened." My hands trembled as I pointed to the door. "Leave, both of you, now, and don't ever come back." They fled, leaving a trail of words, excuses, and shattered trust behind them. I closed the door, the click of the lock echoing in my ears like a hammer on steel. Alone, I sank to the floor, the reality of the betrayal pressing down on me. Hours later, the phone rang. Melody, of course, tears in her voice, trying to twist the story, paint herself as the victim. "Hannah, please, you're overreacting. It meant nothing." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Every rational part of me wanted to scream, to cry, to collapse, to demand answers that wouldn't come. Every emotional part of me felt hollowed out, like a shell where trust had lived, now swept away in a tide of lies. The next morning, I saw the aftermath. Clothes scattered, receipts, notes, all the tangible reminders of their deception. And then came the subtle, cruel twist. I realized Jacob's pattern. This wasn't just a lapse in judgment. This was habitual, a series of choices, reckless and deliberate, that left a trail of broken trust across the lives of everyone involved. I texted our friends, needing to confirm my suspicions, needing witnesses to this destruction. Slowly, the puzzle came together. The stories, the signs, the coincidences, each one a thread in the web Jacob and Melody had spun. And yet, even as the evidence stacked before me, even as my heart throbbed with betrayal and rage, a strange clarity emerged. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't the victim of some inevitable fate. I had choices, and I would make them. The apartment felt empty that night, but my resolve was filling every corner. I would reclaim this space. I would reclaim my life, and I would make sure that the truth, the full, unvarnished truth, came to light. Jacob had underestimated me. Melody had underestimated me. But the story wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The days after the discovery were a haze of anger, grief, and disbelief. I barely slept. Every corner of our apartment, every shared memory, seemed tainted. I kept replaying the scene in my head. Jacob and Melody, laughing quietly, thinking I would never know. But I did know. By Wednesday night, the pieces were starting to fit together. My friends, Jenna, Brooke, and even some reluctant confirmations from Melody's own circle were reaching out. Evidence was surfacing. Texts, screenshots, footage from apartment security, Subtle signs I had brushed off before, late night work calls, unexplained absences, borrowed keys, suddenly screamed the truth. Melody's voice trembled in one of our messages. Hannah, I didn't mean for it to go this far. It just happened. Happened. 3 little letters that carried months of betrayal. I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through texts, rereading them for clues. Every lie she'd told me, every excuse Jacob had given, now revealed itself as part of a deliberate pattern. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was calculated, habitual. Jacob had been pursuing the girlfriends of his friends before. Whispered confirmations from Trevor and Desmond confirmed that much. My heart sank further. I called Jenna first. Her voice was firm, resolute. We need to gather everything. Every message, every receipt, every video. It's the only way to make sense of this, and to stop them from spinning their lies. Together, the 3 of us began tracing the network of deception. Social media posts, DMs, apartment entry logs. Each detail revealed a meticulous effort to hide, manipulate, and charm. Melody had borrowed keys under the guise of errands. Jacob had timed his work trips to cover rendezvous. It was infuriating, meticulous, and cruel. The more evidence I uncovered, the more enraged I became. And yet, beneath the anger, a strange sense of clarity emerged. I could see the pattern, the manipulation, the web they had spun, and that meant I could dismantle it, piece by piece. Jenna, ever the strategist, suggested a face-to-face meeting. We confront them together, she said. They won't have the advantage of lies if we're united. We can't let them gaslight us into thinking we're crazy. I agreed, my hands trembling as I typed the message to Jacob. The confrontation would be inevitable. I had to face him, to see his reactions, to hear him justify what he'd done, or try to. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. Images of their faces, the laughter, the casual touches haunted me. My apartment, once a haven, now felt like a cage. Every memory taunted me. The dinners we'd shared, the quiet mornings, the whispered I love yous. Each one, now a reminder of what had been stolen. And yet, there was a subtle thrill beneath the fear, a spark of empowerment. I was no longer entirely at the mercy of betrayal. I had allies, I had evidence, and most importantly, I had the truth on my side. I started piecing together a timeline. 3 months of hidden encounters, half of them during our shared life. I cataloged every text, every suspicious note. I realized Melody had been using her friendship with me as cover, hiding behind our group's trust to sneak into my life. And Jacob had underestimated me. He had counted on me being too in love, too loyal, too trusting to notice the patterns. But he had miscalculated. I was furious, yes, but I was far from powerless. The confrontation was set for Sunday morning. A neutral space, a coffee shop where no one could claim territorial advantage. It would be Hannah versus the duo who had shattered her world, armed with the evidence of their betrayal. That night, as I lay awake, I felt the weight of what was to come. Fear, anger, heartbreak. They all mingled in a tight knot in my chest. But beneath it all, a sense of purpose emerged. I wasn't just seeking answers, I was reclaiming myself. Jacob's lies, Melody's betrayals, the months of deception, all of it would face the light. And for the first time since that fateful Tuesday, I felt like I might finally breathe again. Sunday morning arrived with a gray, drizzling sky that seemed to mirror my mood. The coffee shop smelled of roasted beans and pastries, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Jenna, Brooke, and I sat at a corner table, our phones buzzing with messages, screenshots, and snippets of evidence we had compiled over the week. When Jacob walked in, his confident stride faltered the moment he saw us. He had expected hesitation, uncertainty, perhaps even forgiveness. But we were united. We had the truth, and nothing could sway us from it. Melody followed, trying to look casual, but I noticed the slight tremor in her hand as she carried her latte. Her gaze flickered between us, searching for cracks, for doubt. There were none. "Hi," Jacob began, voice smooth but unsteady. "Can we talk?" "No," I said, letting the word hang in the air like a guillotine. "You had your chance. This isn't a negotiation." Melody's lips parted, ready to protest. I cut her off with a calm I barely felt. "You've lied to me. You've used my home, my trust, and my friendship as cover. Everything you say now is Irrel Jacob. We're done pretending." The evidence spoke for itself. Screenshots of texts, videos from apartment cameras showing their secret meetings, detailed timelines, each piece a nail in the coffin of their lies. Jenna leaned forward, voice steady. You thought we wouldn't notice, that Hannah was blind to what was happening right under her nose, but we saw it, every detail, and we're not standing by this. Not anymore. Melody opened her mouth, then closed it again, stammering excuses. We didn't mean. I shook my head, the words tasting like steel on my tongue. It wasn't just a mistake. 3 months of betrayal. And you think apologies erase that? Jacob's face went pale. He tried to justify, fumbling with the words. It just happened. It didn't mean anything. Nothing? I snapped. Nothing is months of lying, months of sneaking around while I trusted you both. Nothing is shattering someone's life and thinking you can just walk away. The coffee shop seemed to fade around us, the murmurs of other customers distant and irrel Jacobed. This was our arena. This was justice, measured not in revenge, but in the stark exposure of truth. Jenna pulled out a phone, showing them the apartment security footage. There they were, Jacob and Melody, entering the apartment together, leaving 2 hours later, all while I was at work. The room was silent, except for the low hum of the heater and the occasional gasp from Melody. I thought I was helping, Melody whispered, as if that phrase could undo the months of deceit. I was just comforting him. I laughed, hollow and bitter. Comforting him? In my bed? While lying to me? You've redefined betrayal. Jacob's friends, those he had once trusted, were no longer allies. Their judgments, corroborations, and confessions had all aligned against him. The truth had stripped him bare. By the time we left the coffee shop, the atmosphere was different. I felt lighter, though my chest ached from the confrontation. Jacob and Melody had nowhere left to hide. Their lies, once a shield, were now their undoing. In the following days, the ripple effects were immediate. Social circles shifted. Mutual friends who had been oblivious now knew. Jacob's manipulations were out in the open. Melody, once my closest friend, became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly trust could be shattered. Through it all, I found strength. I realized that loyalty wasn't just about forgiving someone's mistakes. It was about knowing when to walk away, when to demand truth, and when to reclaim your life. Jacob's world had crumbled, not because I sought revenge, but because the truth had its own weight. And for the first time in months, I could breathe freely again. The apartment finally felt like home again, though it took time for the echoes of betrayal to fade. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warm and forgiving, as if it knew that the storm had passed. I spent mornings with coffee in hand, scrolling through messages and reminders of the life I had reclaimed. Jacob and Melody's world had imploded spectacularly. Socially, he was isolated. Work and friends alike had distanced themselves, tired of lies and manipulation. Melody, stripped of her defenses, attempted apologies that fell flat. I didn't respond. Forgiveness wasn't necessary. Recognition of their actions was enough for me. Jenna, Brooke, and the rest of our circle became my anchors. Through the pain, they had proven that loyalty and friendship could endure, even when tested by deception. The bonds we shared were no longer naive. They were tempered by fire, stronger than before. I began to reclaim the parts of myself I had set aside. Hobbies, interests, and quiet moments, once overshadowed by Jacob's presence and Melody's duplicity, became spaces of freedom. I allowed myself to laugh again, to plan for the future, and even to cautiously open my heart to the possibility of love. It wasn't immediate, and it wasn't easy. Every so often, a text or a social media post reminded me that Jacob still lurked in the margins of life, attempting to manipulate, to charm, to rewrite the story. But I had learned the difference between words and actions, promises and betrayal. And then came the small, almost surreal victories. Mutual friends who had been confused or misled before now gravitated toward the truth. Our group outings resumed, trivia nights, BBQs, coffee dates, with laughter that felt genuine, untainted by manipulation. Jacob was absent from these moments, a silent witness to the life he had forfeited. In the quiet, I reflected on everything I had endured. Betrayal, heartbreak, and the slow revelation of truth had all been painful teachers, but they had also been liberating. I realized that love and loyalty were not mutually exclusive, they could coexist, and when they did, they formed a foundation stronger than deception or fleeting desire. The world had shifted beneath me, but I had stood firm. I had chosen myself, my values, and my friends over those who sought to undermine me. And in doing so, I discovered a new kind of power, the power of clarity, of self-respect, and of resilience. As I walked through the city streets that evening, the wind brushing against my face, I felt lighter than I had in months. Life was unpredictable, full of risk and heartache, but it was also full of possibility, and I was ready to embrace it, fully and without hesitation. Because in the end, betrayal had taught me this: the ones who truly matter will stand by you, the lies will crumble under their own weight, and the life you rebuild after heartbreak is often richer, brighter, and stronger than the one you had before. And as for Jacob and Melody, their choices had consequences, and the world had delivered them in kind. I didn't have to act. I only had to remain steadfast. I had lost deceit, but I had gained clarity, and that was more than enough.